we have already started the chapter, the new chapter, chapter 3, force. And in the previous class, I have explained you about the term force, the effects of force, contact and non-contact forces. So these things I have explained you in the last class. So today, I am going to explain you, or we will discuss the three things. One is the friction, the first one is the friction. Second one is the factors affecting the friction. And the third one is the types of friction. So first of all, let us understand about the term friction. The word friction means opposing force. That means the force exerted on the object which does not make that object to move. The force which does not make the object to move. Okay, so some force will be exerted on an object. If you try to move that object, the object will not be able to move, or if it moves also, after traveling a certain distance, slowly the motion starts reducing. The motion will reduce and finally the body will stop. That is the moving body will stop. So what makes the moving body to stop is a force is exerted there, and that force is the force of friction or frictional force, or simply we call it as friction. And friction always exerts between the two surfaces, the two bodies which are in contact. So friction is a type of contact forces. Okay, it is a type of contact forces. So since in a contact force, the two bodies should be actually in contact. There should be the physical contact between the two bodies. So frictional force or the friction is also the example of a contact force. Now the example I'll give you. Suppose you roll a ball on the ground. You just roll the ball on the ground. The ball, it moves on the ground, and slowly what will happen? The motion, the speed of the ball, slowly it starts reducing. It becomes lesser and lesser. And after traveling a certain distance, that ball will finally stops. It comes in the state of rest. But before that, the ball is moving, and slowly the speed of the ball, it starts reducing. It starts becoming lesser and lesser, and finally the ball will stop. Again, another point, when you stop paddling, suppose you are riding a bicycle, and when you stop paddling, the speed of the bicycle slowly it starts decreasing, it starts becoming less or reduces, and finally that bicycle will stop. So what makes the moving body or the body which are in the state of motion, what makes that moving body to stop? Some force is produced there between the two bodies, between the two surfaces. Okay, one example, for the first example is the ball is on the ground, the ball is in contact with the ground, okay, and the force of friction, the opposing force we call it, the opposing force will exert between the surface of the ball and the ground, and therefore the speed of the ball starts reducing, and finally the ball comes in the state of rest. Likewise, when you stop paddling also, okay, the tire of the bicycle is in contact with the ground, okay, and when you stop paddling, slowly the speed reduces, the motion it starts becoming lesser, and finally the bicycle will stop. So that means from this example we can say that there is a contact between the ball and the ground. There is a contact between the wheel of the bicycle, the tire we call it, okay, the tire of the bicycle and the ground, and there is a contact between the two surfaces here. So when there is a contact between the two surfaces, some opposing force will be exerted there, and that force we call it as a frictional force, or simply we call it as a friction. So the term friction means opposing force, okay, in which the force will reduce the motion of the body or an object. So that is about the friction. Second one is the factors affecting the friction. Okay, there are two factors here. One is the nature of surface in contact with each other. Nature of surface. Now, what kind of surface are there? The surface can be two types. One is a smooth surface and other one is a rough surface. Rough surface means irregular. The surface is irregular. So when we consider the two surfaces here, okay, the rough surface or irregular surface, the friction will be more. Okay, and in the smooth surface, the friction will be less. The friction gets reduced in a smooth surface. Like suppose you spill the water on the floor. Okay, and when you step it on that on the floor where the water has been spilled out in the floor, what will happen? You'll fall down. Okay, you'll fall down. Or when you spread the marbles or lubricants, oil on the floor, when you step it on the floor where all this type of marbles or lubricants, we call it grease, oil, okay, water, when you spread it on the floor, while walking, when you step it on that surface, you will fall. So how it happens is that this water, marbles, lubricants like the oil, grease, etc., they will reduce the friction. That means by applying these things on the surface, the friction will be reduced. That means the surface will become smooth. So therefore, the smooth surface will have less friction. So when there is less friction, you won't be able to walk. That means immediately once you step it on that floor or on the surface, you will fall it. Okay, you will fall it down. So therefore we can say that smooth surface have less friction, rough surface has more friction. So the first one is nature of surface in contact. Okay, so the two surfaces are there, rough surface and the smooth surface. The friction will be more on the rough surface compared with that of the smooth surface. Second one, weight of the body. Okay, now the weight of the body is directly proportional to the friction. That means more the weight of the body, okay, more the friction will be produced. That means it becomes very difficult you to walk. Like you can take a labor, a coolie carrying a very heavy luggage on his back. Okay, so when he carry luggage on his back, he has to lean forward. Okay, and the load or the luggage is so heavy, so he won't be able to move because of the load. So therefore, his own weight is there. On the top of that, he is carrying the load, the other weight also. That means his own weight is there, body weight is already there. On the top of that, he is carrying some luggage and some heavy object is carrying. So therefore, what will happen? It becomes unable or uneasy to move. So therefore, in that case, the friction will be more. So therefore, the friction will be more. Okay, when the weight of the body will become more. So therefore, friction is directly proportional to the weight of the body. So lesser the weight of the body, lesser will be the friction. More the weight of the body, more will be the friction. So that is why it is stated that friction is directly proportional to the weight of the body. And friction, and we can write it here, friction is directly proportional to the weight of the body. That means F this is a sign of proportionality. And this we read it as alpha, A-L-P-H-A, alpha. Okay, friction, F I have written here. This is a sign of proportionality. Friction is directly proportional to the weight. So that means more the weight, more will be the friction. Lesser the weight, lesser will be the friction. So these are factors affecting the friction. Now the third one is types of friction. There are three types of friction. One is the static friction. Second one is the dynamic friction or the sliding friction. Okay, or the kinetic friction also we call it here, dynamic friction, sliding friction or the kinetic friction, and the third one is the rolling friction. The three types of frictions are there. Number one is the static frictions. The meaning of the word static means rest, not to move. The meaning of the word static means rest, in which the body will not move. Okay, suppose a wooden block is kept on the table. And if a force is applied, if a lesser force is applied on that wooden block placed on the table, the wooden block will not move. It will not move. It remains at rest, it remains stationary. Okay, so there the friction is produced there, and that friction we call it as a static friction. Okay, so static friction makes a body, does not make a body to move, even if you apply a force. That means the lesser force you apply. You just take a table, on the top of the table you keep some wooden block, okay, anything you can keep it, and you just try to push it. That means a lesser force. You just give a pat on that wooden block. Okay, that wooden block will not move because the force we have applied is less. Okay, and why that wooden block will not move is that because the friction is produced between the tabletop and the wooden block. Okay, the surface of the wooden block and the tabletop, because the wooden block is on the top of the table and there is a contact between the table and the surface of the wooden block, so therefore the wooden block will not be able to move. So that we call it as a static friction. And therefore the dynamic friction or sliding friction or kinetic friction. Kinetic means moving body. When a body moves, when a body is in motion, we call it as a kinetic. Or sliding means when a body slides. Okay, when the body will slide or it moves. Now, for this dynamic friction, when you apply the force, when you increase the amount of force, when you increase the amount of force from before. So, before in a sliding friction, we have applied less force. Now, you just increase the force. When you increase the force on the table, on the wooden block, place it on the table. Now that wooden block will slide, they will move. They will slide. Okay, they will move. And now they will move. Okay, they will move in such a way so they will just slide out. They will not move freely because friction is already been produced here. Okay, so that wooden block will slide on the tabletop or on the surface of the table. Okay, so therefore that friction is known as the dynamic friction or the sliding friction or the kinetic friction. The third one is the rolling friction. Rolling friction means when a body rolls on the surface, then that friction is called the rolling friction. Now all the vehicles, like you can take a car, a bus or scooter or bike, okay, it becomes very difficult to move them if they don't have wheel, okay, because they are very rigid, okay, and it becomes very difficult to move. So because of the wheel present on that vehicle, okay, it becomes easy to move that vehicle. So therefore, this rolling friction will make a body to roll on the surface. It will simply make the body to roll on the surface. Another example I give. You take a heavy drawer for a table, heavy drawer. So that means it will become unable to move. They will only slide. That when we apply the force on that drawer, a huge drawer, the drawer will slide, but they will not be able to move. Now what you do is that now when you put some wooden roll inside that drawer, that means just beneath the base of the drawer, you just put the wooden roll like this. Okay, number of wooden roll you just keep it at put it at the base of the drawer. The drawer is object in which you are pushing, you are trying to move. Now what happens is that once you put that wooden roll, okay, cylindrical roll, and you say wooden rolls, which is in the shape of a cylinder, just underneath that drawer, and you push it, what will happen? The drawer can easily move. Okay, so that means how the drawer will move is that when you push it, what will happen? The wooden cylinder or the wooden roll which you have placed it under the drawer, they will roll. They will roll and they will move. And once they will move, the movement at the roller will move that drawer. Okay, so therefore now that we call it as a rolling friction. So when we consider this dynamic friction and or the sliding friction or the kinetic friction, this friction is less than the static friction. because static friction is more, because static friction means it doesn't make a body to move. Then again, rolling friction. Okay, when we consider the rolling friction, again dynamic friction and rolling friction when we consider, this dynamic friction or the kinetic friction is less than the rolling friction. Okay, so that is the rolling friction is less than the rolling friction. So therefore, when we consider the types of friction here, one friction doesn't make a body to move, which we call it the static friction. Another friction is there, that is dynamic friction or the sliding friction. It makes a body to slide. And the third one is rolling friction, which makes a body to roll on the surface. So this is about the types of friction. So we have come to the end of this of the friction. The 3 points we have discussed so far. One is the friction, factors affecting the friction, types of friction. So in the next class we will come to the effects of friction. Thank you.